look at the modern map. Nearly 30 countries stretching from North Africa through the Middle East all the way to the Balkans were once part of an ancient superpower. It wasn't Rome nor Persia. It was the Ottoman Empire, a power that once soared like an eastern eagle, dominating over 5.5 million square kilometers. If it still existed today, it would be the seventh largest country in the world, far surpassing even India in land area. But what transformed a once obscure principality into a power that struck fear across both Europe and the Middle East? The story begins on the distant steppes of Central Asia, where a group of nomads descendants of the Gokturk tribes once lived under the shadow of the Tang dynasty. Fleeing persecution from ancient China, they wandered into Persia in the 10th century, gradually moving westward, passing through Armenia, and eventually reaching Anatolia, the land that would later become the heart of the Ottoman Empire. This migration was anything but peaceful. As the nomadic tribes clashed with established powers, they confronted one of the mightiest forces of the time, the Byzantine Empire, also known as the Eastern Roman Empire. The Battle of Manzikert in 1071 marked a historic turning point. The Turks scored a resounding victory over the Byzantines, opening the door for the Seljuk dynasty to rule Asia Minor. But fate took another turn. In 1243, Mongol armies swept in, crushing the Seljuks and fracturing their realm into smaller principalities known as beyliks. In one of these beyliks nestled in Anatolia, a man named Osman, whom one might liken to the Richard the Lionheart of the East, achieved the unimaginable. In 1299, he proclaimed himself sultan or king and laid the foundation for the Ottoman Empire. Not with a massive army, but with strategic vision, Osman I gradually expanded his borders, slipping into decaying Byzantine territories, forging alliances with local powers, and recruiting fierce warriors from all religions and ethnicities. But his victories weren't won by sword alone. They were aided by the decline of older powers. The Byzantines had become a crumbling monument, and the Seljuks were now just a faded shadow in history. Anatolia had become a no-man's land, a frontier where authority had collapsed. Osman understood the times and seized every opportunity to build a new dynasty. Unlike many feudal states of the era, the Ottoman Empire was not obsessed with ethnic or religious purity. Under Osman and his successors, the Ottomans acted like a political chameleon, shifting their colors to adapt to changing circumstances. They could ally with Muslims, make deals with Christian sects, or negotiate with Jews so long as it brought them power. One of their most brilliant strategies was the millet system, a legal framework that allowed different communities within the empire to govern themselves. Each group, be it Orthodox Christians, Jews, or Muslims, was permitted to maintain its own laws, culture, and religion so long as they remained loyal to the empire. This system allowed the Ottomans to maintain stability across a vast multi-ethnic territory where endless conflict might otherwise have erupted. But every glory comes at a cost. The foundations of the Ottoman Empire were laid with blood fire and an unyielding belief in destiny, and the story of their rise was only just beginning. After the death of Osman, the legendary founder of the Ottoman Empire, the flame of conquest did not die out. His son Orhan succeeded the throne and decided to move the capital to the city of Bursa. From there, the wheel of history began to turn faster. The Ottomans did not stop at Anatolia. They began to reach across the eastern Mediterranean and advance directly into the heart of the Balkan Peninsula. No army in southeastern Europe at the time could withstand the storm known as the Ottomans. But what was the real secret behind this seemingly invincible power? A crucial part of the answer lies in the legendary military unit known as the Janissaries elite warriors, formed by Sultan Murad Narm, the third ruler of the Ottoman lineage. These were no ordinary soldiers, they were Christian boys, mostly taken from Balkan villages during Ottoman conquests. Once brought to the military camps, the boys were converted to Islam and trained with strict discipline to become living war machines. But the most astonishing part was this: those who were once enslaved could rise to hold some of the highest offices in the state, even the post of Grand Vizier, second only to the Sultan. The Janissaries were not only loyal, they regarded the empire as their only true family. By the late 14th century, the Ottomans had gained control over most of the Anatolian principalities, and large swaths of the Balkans. Regions like Thessaloniki, a crucial city once held by Venice, were annexed in 1387. 2 years later, they defeated the Serbs at Kosovo, a battle that became a symbol of the unstoppable Ottoman rise in Europe. When the Christian kingdoms attempted a counteroffensive, the last crusade of the Middle Ages, the Battle of Nicopolis in 1396, ended in catastrophic defeat. Nothing seemed capable of halting the Ottomans until a storm rose from the east. His name was Timur, also known as Tamerlane, the war god of Central Asia. As the Ottomans expanded westward, Timur launched a surprise attack from the east and defeated Sultan Bayezid at the Battle of Ankara. Bayezid was captured alive, and the empire plunged into chaos. A civil war over succession raged for 10 years from 1402 to 1413, nearly destroying everything Osman and his descendants had built. Conquered territories such as Macedonia, Thessaloniki, and Kosovo fell from Ottoman control one by one. Yet from the shadows a new light was kindled. Mehmed I, one of the surviving princes, emerged victorious in the succession war and restored the empire from its ashes. He was followed by his son Sultan Murad II, who entered the historical stage. From the 1430s to the 1450s, Murad gradually reclaimed lost lands and rebuilt the foundations of an empire many thought had collapsed. But even those victories were just the beginning. To truly announce the return of the Ottomans, they needed a symbolic conquest. And there was only one target worthy of that ambition: Constantinople, the jewel of the East, the 1,000-year-old heart of the Byzantine Empire. This city had long symbolized the power of Eastern Rome. It had stood firm for 100 years. There had been 23 attempts to breach it from across the world, even from Sultan Murad II himself, but all had failed. The city stood defiant, as if protected by the hand of God. Until Mehmed II, Murad's son, ascended the throne. A young and ambitious ruler, Mehmed carried a vow to fulfill the mission his forebears could not. He was not only a warrior, but also a brilliant strategist. He understood that power in his era did not come only from swords and arrows, but from technology. In the spring of 1453, Mehmed led an army of 80,000 Ottomans toward Constantinople. To break through the city's legendary defenses, he hired a Hungarian blacksmith, a master engineer, to forge the largest cannons the world had ever seen. Artillery was not a new invention, but the massive bombards Mehmed brought to the battlefield were weapons far beyond the imagination of the time, and they would write a new chapter in the history of all Europe. The cannons brought by Mehmed II were not merely weapons, they were symbols of a new era. Measuring over 8 meters in length and firing projectiles weighing up to half a ton, these cannons were named Basilica. Never before had such artillery appeared on medieval battlefields. Their thunderous blast not only shook the walls of Constantinople, but also shook the foundations of the Old World Order. To support the assault, Mehmed II even hired Serbian miners to dig secret tunnels beneath the city walls, aiming to undermine the defenses from below. But his boldest tactic came not from the land, but from the sea. Mehmed II achieved the unthinkable. He transported his entire naval fleet over land, across slopes, through forests, over hills and rocky terrain. The goal: to bypass the iron chain that blocked the Golden Horn, once considered an impenetrable barrier, and attack the city from the rear. This maneuver caught the Byzantine defenses completely off guard. After more than 2 months of siege in the spring of 1453, Constantinople, the great capital that had once been the heart of the Byzantine Empire, finally fell. And with it, an era that had lasted more than a millennium officially came to an end. Mehmed II declared the city the new capital of the Ottoman Empire and renamed it Istanbul, a city of Islam, but also a bridge between East and West. At that time, Constantinople was merely a shadow of its former self, a crumbling relic of its once glorious past. However, under Ottoman rule, it was quickly reborn. The city's strategic location, connecting Europe and Asia, and controlling the key trade routes of the Mediterranean, made it the perfect choice for an emerging empire. Thus, the conquest of Constantinople was not merely a military victory. It became a launchpad that propelled the Ottomans into their golden age. Art, architecture, and commerce all flourished. Craftsmen from across the known world, from the Middle East, Africa, and Central Asia to Europe, flocked to Istanbul, creating a rich and unprecedented cultural fusion. Iznik ceramics, one of the most iconic Ottoman art forms, are a testament to this blend. Their techniques were inspired by China's Ming dynasty, but infused with Islamic motifs and the spirit of the Ottoman world. From Istanbul, Eastern goods, such as coffee, were introduced to Europe, transforming the consumption habits of the old continent. The Ottomans controlled major land and sea trade routes, making it impossible to travel between East and West without passing through their empire. By the early 16th century, the Ottomans had risen to become one of the most powerful empires in the world. It was the age of legendary sultans, among them Selim I, who conquered Egypt, Syria, Arabia, and even the Holy Land of Palestine. These conquests made the Ottomans masters of the Middle East, the vital crossroads of trade linking three continents. The Ottoman Navy also rose as a dominant force in the Mediterranean, controlling ports, protecting merchant fleets, and asserting naval supremacy. But the empire reached its most glorious height during the reign of Suleiman the Magnificent from 1520 to 1566. Under his rule, the empire achieved its peak in territory, power, and culture. The Ottomans advanced as far as Hungary and Poland in the north, and even captured Baghdad from the Persians, gaining control over the wealthy Mesopotamian region. The Ottoman fleet reached the Persian Gulf, linking military power with key strategic trade routes. By the late 1560s, the empire's influence had extended as far as half of Sumatra. However, not all campaigns ended in glory. The city of Vienna, capital of Austria, successfully resisted multiple Ottoman sieges. In 1529, due to severe weather, the Ottoman army was forced to retreat. In 1532, another 25,000 Ottoman soldiers failed once again. Despite being unable to capture Vienna, the empire reached its zenith in economics, politics, science, and military might under Suleiman's rule. When Suleiman the Magnificent passed away in 1566, the Ottoman population had reached 15 million. The empire now stretched across three continents, wielding profound influence in religion, law, and culture. But the peak also marked the beginning of decline. As the 17th century unfolded, the Ottoman Empire gradually began to weaken. Continuous campaigns against Austria and Persia stretched its resources thin. The eastern and western frontiers became overextended, and the Ottoman Navy slowly lost its dominance in the increasingly competitive global trade arena. By the early 20th century, the tide had turned. During the Balkan Wars of 1912 to 1913, the Ottomans lost nearly all of their European territories. Soon after, they suffered a complete defeat in World War I, and in 1918, the once mighty empire collapsed. By 1922, the Ottoman monarchy was officially abolished, bringing to a close a glorious chapter that had lasted for more than 600 years. The map that had once been painted red with the Ottoman imprint from Hungary to North Africa, from the Middle East to Southeast Asia, was now just a remnant in the pages of history books. Yet the legacy of the empire has not vanished. It lives on in architecture, in cuisine, in languages, and even in the very soul of modern-day Istanbul.